Livy writes, before a Roman even took a step toward the enemy line, half of the Gauls were dead.
Rome, as being incipient to all these civilizational technologies and protocols we use, and eventually led to the forking into the East Roman Empire.
Then you've got the Roman army, and that tells a different story. I mean, the Roman army it takes us back to this issue of there was never such thing as a fair fight. The Romans weren't fighting fair. They would have laughed at you. Like the Roman approach to this was to take my illustration of the slinger on the cliff and take it to a whole new level. The Romans manufactured, ballista, and they manufactured catapults, and they manufactured every sword to be the same length, every shield to be the same size, every soldier took the same step, the same length. Everything was the same. You could be an 8-foot tall Goliath, and the Roman 5-foot 10-inch tall normal dude, right, is going to beat the crap out of you because you're not going to get within 12 feet of him because you're going to take a spear in the gut from the 12 guys standing to his left and his right as you charge. Mm-hmm. Yep. Right? There's no in all of these time periods, all these wars, and you read Livy and he describes them very in depth over and over again. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of battles, and they always consisted of the Romans maneuvered to get the high ground. The Romans maneuvered to get the enemy out on the plain. The Romans unleashed the artillery onto the enemy while they stood and obliterated 10% of them. Then the Romans unleashed some more artillery. There's one story where the Roman army cornered the Gauls. The Gauls are on a mountaintop, on a hillside, and the Romans are below. They just surround them. They stop. They start to pummel them, and they rain down hell from above, bullets, boulders, flame, napalm, and Livy writes, before a Roman even took a step toward the enemy line, half of the Gauls were dead, and 80% of them had been maimed or incapacitated from the bullets.
Wow.
And then the Romans start to move up and do something. It's like this. There's none of this. Let's just charge into battle and fight it out with our sword, right? Never happened that way. It was always going to be find a way to get an advantage. And by the way, the technology is very critical, right? People think like the Romans had a military-industrial complex, right? There's a way to do it. You're going to do it in a certain way. They had an entire body language, an entire system of how you're going to act. And, if you want something which is eye-opening, there's this story of the Roman Navy from the First Punic War. The Carthaginians dominate the Mediterranean. The Romans are a land power. The Romans don't know anything about naval power, but it tells you a lot about the Roman psyche and the Roman intellect. The Romans are getting beat up by the Carthaginians because the Carthaginians control the ports and they have the fleet. The Romans have no fleet. One day, a storm kicks up, and the storm drives a Carthaginian naval ship, into a Roman port. It's blown into the port by a bad mistral. The Romans capture it. They take it apart to try to figure out how the Carthaginians make their ships. And you can't make this up. This is the most amazing thing in history. They find out that the Carthaginians make their ships from a kit, from reusable, standardized parts. And not only are all the parts standardized, the Carthaginians have labeled each part with the instructions of where it fits and the number of the part. The Romans deconstruct the entire thing, steal the entire blueprint, 90 days later, they made 150 ships. You think these guys are screwing around, right? They're not screwing around. It's like everybody thinks, oh yeah, well, yeah, I'm going to take my time to figure this stuff out. No, war has a way of quickening your time, your activity. Bam, I'm losing. I find a ship. That's the DNA. That's the formula of the ship. 150 ships. To make a long story short, the Romans win the First Punic War and they vanquish the Carthaginians and they become the naval power. And of course, it's not that the Romans invented everything. It's just the Romans stole every good idea from every civilization, from the Greeks, from the Carthaginians, from the whatever that they crushed. And because they lasted, we're able to read their histories. But, it kind of blows your mind when you think that in 500, by the way, you think the Carthaginians invented that? Maybe they stole it from the Phoenicians.
Right. Yeah.
But 500 BC, if you want to win wars, you don't just make ships and you don't just train hard and you don't make wagons, right? Roman roads. The Romans had standardized parts, a standardized gauge for a wagon wheel. Every Roman wagon rolling on the road is carving ruts in the road. That gauge has to be standardized. You can't just make any wagon. You have to make it exactly the same.
Right.
Okay. This is for all those people that believe, that recoil in standardization. Well, that Roman wagon gauge eventually became the standard width of a railroad track in Europe. And then eventually the standard width of a railroad track everywhere. So if you want to know how wide a Roman chariot was, or a war chariot, or any chariot, just go stand on a railroad anywhere on earth. The Romans gave that to you. And the reason why they did it that way is because if you build wagons with different gauges, they fall in the rut, they snap the axle, and that's death.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, it's like Henry Ford said, you can have it any color as long as it's black. No, you can't have it any way you want it. You take it, well, you can. By the way, it's not that every civilization figured this out. It's just that every civilization that insisted upon doing it a different way with different bells and whistles got crushed to death.
Right.
And there's an analogy to this in the Bitcoin world too. When you come up with a different feature and it's like, it would just be 10% better. If you made your wagon 10% wider, it would hold 20% more and you would need 10% less and your transaction cost would be less and your whatever.
Yeah. I think it's
better.
It points towards path dependence too, right? Like the fact that a technology already took a certain path, it kind of has an inertia, right? An inertia that's carried the width of the gauge of a wagon wheel to the width of a modern rail. And I thought it was interesting too how you pointed to the civilizations that won out, the Romans or the Carthaginians, are the ones that studied their history, right? So they're actually gleaning insights from civilizations that had come before them, which again is kind of harkens back to that Yuval Harari concept of our ability to abstract our learnings into symbols like language and whatnot, and then pass them from generation to generation, such that the most successful strategies take advantage of the collective learnings up until that point, versus trying to just do something from scratch on your own. Like we all stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak.
Those roads were the logistics network of the Roman Empire. And if you can move goods and services, if you can move armies faster inside your borders, then your enemies can move inside their borders, right? Then you're going to win, right? You've got a major advantage. And of course, if everybody lays down a railroad track that's a certain width, and you come up with an idea for a car that's got a different width, who are you going to sell it to?
Right.
Right. People talk about protocols being important, right? Well, the TCP/IP wasn't the first protocol. You know, Roman roads probably weren't the first protocol either. But the point is, protocols matter, and it's arrogant. But I'm sure that the Egyptians had protocols to build those pyramids. Standard size and standard widths and standard weights and measures. Those protocols matter a heck of a lot, and if you don't have them, it's impossible for people to cooperate. So money, we've talked about money a lot as being essential for civilization to cooperate and allowing us to specialize. But all these other logistics protocols or military protocols are in their own way equally important. And I'll make one last point on just Roman engineering and aqueducts, right? The Romans understood the importance of hydraulics, and they took it to a new level. They actually created aqueducts that would bring water from up to 70 miles away to a given city. There are a lot of coastal towns on the Med that are not inhabitable. I mean, the natural economic density is really a function of the amount of water per year. So if the amount of water per year is based on rainwater, maybe you can have 500 people live in the city. And if you bring the aqueduct, it goes to 5,000 or 50,000. And so the economic density requires the hydraulic flow for sanitation and just to keep everybody alive. And so engineering the roads, engineering the aqueducts, it's the rails upon which the entire Iron Age civilization was built. And Romans, if anything, they're engineers. And they elevated engineering above all. And what is engineering? I mean, I'm an engineer. I think engineering is an incredibly honorable, ethical, life-affirming profession. That the basic credo of the engineer is, I look at nature and I look at the circumstances that I'm surrounded by, and I use my intellect and every material and technique at hand in order to construct a better world for everyone and everything that I love. That's the credo. I'm not going to be a victim of circumstance. I'm going to actually change my circumstances with my intellect, and that might mean build a bridge. It might mean build an aqueduct. It might mean build a road. It might mean build a ship, whatever it is. Just like the beaver builds the dam, the engineer builds the world. Look at any city where you take the bridge down and try to figure out how life changes, and it's pretty consequential. So, if we just leave, I'll leave you with one more vignette on Rome, and then we'll move on, I think, to the Dark Ages. I have a holding company. The holding company is called Alcantara. And Alcantara is based upon something I saw in Alcantara, Spain. It's a Roman bridge. It stood for 2,000 years. And if you go underneath that bridge, you'll find a Roman inscription in Latin where the Roman engineer, whose name is Julius Locker, said, quote, "This bridge will stand for all time," unquote. They took their engineering seriously. Right.
Yeah. This, I recall from Taleb's writing that the architects of, I actually think the Roman aqueducts, there was to give the architect skin in the game, so to speak, that he would be required himself, or even with his family at times, to stand beneath the aqueduct as the scaffolding was removed, right? So he knew it was his life and possibly his family's life on the line should his architectural abilities be incompetent, right? So these people took again, it's a protocol, right? It's a protocol and an incentive or a disincentive to malperformance for that architect to take his profession very seriously. And I think too, another thing that came to mind is you were talking about Rome as being incipient to all these civilizational technologies and protocols we use. What ultimately led to the downfall of Rome was their monetary protocol being compromised, right? It was the debasement of the coin, I think started with Nero, and eventually led to the forking into the East Roman Empire.
And their political protocols compromised.
Yeah.
A series of civil wars, Caesar's being the most famous, but a series of civil wars where the political protocols broke down, even before the monetary protocols broke down. But you can see they're all related, right? At some point, the integrity of the society broke down, and when they lost their integrity across all these areas, the collapse of the political system begat the collapse of the military system, the religion. How do you maintain your patriotism in Rome when one Roman army is fighting another Roman army?
Right. Was there an inflection point that you recall that sort of led to all these protocols being compromised?
Around 50 BC, it all started going bad. Maybe. I'll come back to it. A whole series of wars in Julius Caesar's youth, and the rise of a series of strong men, and the weakening of the Roman Republic. Taleb, I think, makes great points in his books about how it's the death penalty in Babylon if you screwed with weights and measures.
That's right.
Or if you're a builder and your house collapses, right? Someone in your own family dies. They're definitely great skin in the point games, and they just skin in the game points. Sorry, and they just remind you that in a society that respects natural law, right? Nature is not going to pity you, and she's not listening for excuses. If you, I know this is not quite relevant, but I can't help but state it. The richest man in China a year or 2 years ago was out on summer vacation in the south of France. The guy's worth $20-30 billion. And he decided to take a selfie or get a photo, and he stood up on a rock wall at some ancient ruin in the south of France. And while they were taking the photo, he slipped and fell off the side of the wall and plunged 50 feet to his death. And again, somewhat emblematic of the point. It doesn't matter if you have an army of lawyers and $1 billion of clout. In that last 2 seconds of his life, he was punished by violating the law of gravity with a death sentence.
That's right.
It's like, gravity doesn't care who you are. Nature doesn't care. It doesn't. The richest man in China out of 1 billion people, and he was sentenced to immediate death, no appeal, in a split second for being careless. And when society forms all of these appeals and excuses, and they let everybody off the hook, it's like, well, if you make a market in accepting excuses and lawsuits, you're going to get a lot of lawsuits and a lot of excuses.
Right. Yeah. This is and then too big to fail institutions, right? We're interrupting this evolutionary impulse. We're not learning at a business and civilizational level when we preserve institutions artificially.
I'm very persuaded by all of the points made by Taleb and also by the paleo theorist about the importance of pain in life. Pain is a natural teacher, and you can learn a lot of things via pain, right? You try to pick up a chair the wrong way, you do something the wrong fashion, and the pain is a feedback and it's information. And when you try to cut off the pain flow through anesthetics or steroid shots or cortisone
or QE
or QE or an appeal or a lawyer or a bribe or however it is, you avoid paying the price, the consequences for your misstep. Right? It's try to suspend gravity. Well, good luck with that, right?
Right.
If you could have suspended gravity, for $1 billion in that 1 second, how much other screwy stuff would have happened everywhere else in the world while that gravity was suspended?
Right.
Guy.
Exactly.
The damage would have been maybe 1,000,000 times worse.
Yeah.
I mean, gravity is key.
There's a good reason you can't compromise nature's protocols, right? And we should mirror that through natural law.
That would be the healthy approach, right?
Yeah.
That's the paleo theory. That's the theory of anti-fragility. That's the theory of Austrian economics and capitalism properly understood, and Darwinian evolution and natural equilibrium.